What's going on, everyone? Couple of shout outs before we get started. Claudia Brown for being the toppest. She knows what she did. Also this guy, whose name I won't try and pronounce, for drawing this. Very cute. And a reference to a very kind nickname I've been given on Twitter. I won't repeat the nickname because I don't want to look like I'm tooting my own horn too much, but I absolutely did bite the style of someone much better. So look, I don't want this channel to just become a Black Pigeon Speaks response thing, or even just a response channel. Hopefully this isn't a trend. I guess we'll see how it goes though. People like Black Pigeon Speaks keep uploading stuff that I'm compelled to respond to. In this case, it's Black Pigeon Speaks' new electoral hope video. This time though, my video is going to be much shorter than the last one. I'm sure you'll all be very happy about that. So here it is, a new electoral hope. Yeah, nah. As always, make sure you watch this video first, check both of our sources, and please offer any thoughts and corrections as you feel are necessary. In this BPS video, as I'm afraid to say seems common, there seems to be a lot of unsourced claims and a lot of hyperbole. In the interest of keeping this contained then, I'm going to try and focus on a few main points. So here's a quick summary of the parts of the video from BPS that I'll be looking at. So in his video, BPS describes the poor state of the Italian economy before segueing into discussing what he calls a migrant crisis. He describes this ostensible crisis as being the focus for many Italians in the lead up to the elections. He then further describes the irregular migration, love that term, as being supported by people smugglers and human traffickers. Their narratives of those who oppose migration are then framed as being grassroots in origin. He then gives an example of an Italian-born woman being murdered and dismembered by a man from Nigeria, along with the story of an Italian man committing drive-by shootings as an act of revenge for said murder. Shortly thereafter, BPS places the blame for social issues, including attacks experienced by migrants, upon said migrants by describing, quote, the escalating social crisis the migrants have brought with them. He then describes the rise of right-wing parties in Italy, which is worth keeping in mind is something he has celebrated in the title of his video as electoral hope. Now, my response to all of this. First, let's assess the idea that Italy is experiencing a migrant crisis. In the last 4 years, Italy has taken in 600,000 migrants, which I guess sounds like a lot, but Italy has over 60 million people living there. So that's a population increase of 1% in 4 years, which of course is 0.25% per annum. It's hardly a huge influx. In total, there's about 5 million migrants living in Italy, so that's about 8% of the total population. Again, hardly swamped. Nevertheless, these 5 million people are reportedly worth as much to the Italian economy as the Fiat car company. So I'd suggest that given the economic concerns for Italy, migrants should perhaps be welcomed. In terms of crimes committed by these migrants, because that's always the perception we need to discuss, from my searching about, I found this paper that cited that the only crime migrants increased was burglary. And then I found this one, which stated that while so-called illegal migrants were overrepresented in crime stats, the effect disappeared when age was taken into account. So all in all, we have a small number of migrants compared to Italy's total population that boosts the Italian economy and which has a small to nil impact on crime rates. I don't think one could call this a crisis. And it's that understanding that leads me to the main topic of this video, discourse theory. Now, discourse theory was first described by our old mate Michel Foucault, which is a name I know I can't pronounce properly, which is why I did it sarcastically. Allow me to summarise this theory by stating that it describes that the ability to frame a discourse, i.e. the messages a group of people receive about a topic, leads to influence over opinion. There's lots of documented examples. A favourite and relevant one is the discourse around asylum seekers entering Australia through irregular means. Just imagine me doing the air quotes for that one. Here's just one paper of many analysing the situation, concluding that the characterisation of asylum seekers as illegal migrants led to misrepresentation of the issue. To chuck an extra one in for good measure, Newen and McCallum 2016, concluding that language used by politicians and the media was able to characterise boat arrivals as being a social menace. Now of course the relevance in this case is that, if we accept that there is no crisis of migration in Italy, discourse theory helps us to understand some of why these far-right groups are able to use migration as a platform to seek to achieve political power. It is of course an old story. It isn't hard to convince people that they can place blame for their problems on outsiders, and I do accept that a lot of people have taken on the negative image of migration into Italy. What I don't as readily accept is that people by and large in Italy would have come to this conclusion by themselves, and I certainly do not think that given only an accurate, complete and fact-based picture of migration into the country that people would support far right-wing parties as readily. Now, discourse analysis has taken on a few new dimensions in the internet and modern age, especially recently, and they're quite relevant to mention here. The need to account for an ability for a person or organisation to share an opinion and have it seen and shared by many people before it can be analysed and perhaps refuted by qualified people is of course one. As well, there is a tendency among all of us humanoids to access news sources that agree with established views, which is further promoted online. It isn't hard to find an op-ed that feels familiar and agrees with you on just about anything. But essentially, and I'm sure you've all worked this out by now, I'm talking about discourse theory because this BPS video is an example of an attempt, and probably a successful attempt, to shape and control discourse. In referring to a migration crisis, in framing this migration as illegal, and in underlaying his video with scary images of people breaking things while ostensibly not assessing crime stats or the effect of migration on the Italian economy, BPS is shaping the discourse, and most troublingly, doing so inaccurately. To go further, BPS is of course further shaping the discourse by adding the example of a crime committed by an immigrant in murdering and dismembering a locally born woman as mentioned. Again, of course, this example says as much about migrants on the whole as the actions of one man to start doing drive-bys in response says about all Italians. But when it is presented alongside a celebration of the rise of the Italian right, and with the uncritical evaluation of said response of that one Italian guy, which by the way cannot be dismissed as even reporting of the facts given BPS's willingness to editorialise when it suits, it is again deliberately and disingenuously shaping the discourse. So I guess BPS shouldn't be surprised by the rise of quote xenophobia in Italy or elsewhere. But the rise of xenophobia is not, as he would suggest and have us believe, a result of Italians waking up to the realities occurring in their homeland. It is instead because of people like himself, framing discourses in, and I won't apologise for speaking my mind on this one, a very dangerous and I believe disingenuous manner. Despite that straying to stronger language than I usually try for, I will as always listen to any and all well-intentioned dispute of my narrative here. So please have at it. Until next time, this has been Yeah Nah, thanks for watching.